It was a hot Wednesday afternoon in South Dallas, the kind of heat that makes the pavement shimmer like a mirage, and your shirt cling to your back with every breath. Marvin Carter, a 33-year-old software engineer, had just left a local tech conference downtown. With his laptop bag slung over his shoulder and a bottle of water in hand, he cut across the quiet neighborhood on his way to his car parked a few blocks away. Marvin was the kind of man who exuded calm. Tall, neatly dressed in khakis and a button-down shirt, he had the look of someone who had worked hard to get where he was. A Morehouse College graduate, proud son of a retired teacher and a church deacon, Marvin wasn't just successful. He was grounded. And yet, none of that mattered the moment he stepped into the wrong kind of spotlight. As he turned the corner of Rosemont Avenue, he heard the sharp crackle of a police siren. Seconds later, a black and white patrol car screeched to a stop beside him. Marvin instinctively stepped back, confused. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" One of the officers shouted as he jumped out of the car, his hand resting firmly on his holstered weapon. Marvin froze, blinking against the sunlight. "Is something wrong, officer?" The officer, a younger white man with mirrored sunglasses and a tight jaw, approached quickly. "We got a report of a break-in at the old house down the street. You match the description." Marvin blinked, bewildered. "I just left a conference at the convention center. I'm heading to my car." The second officer, older and more silent, walked over to Marvin's bag. "What's in here?" "My laptop, charger, notebook," Marvin said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You can check. I haven't done anything." But they didn't just check. They grabbed his arms, twisted them behind his back, and cuffed him roughly against the hot hood of the patrol car. Passers-by began to stop. Some pulled out phones. Marvin's face flushed with humiliation and fear. "I'm not resisting," he repeated. "I have my ID in my back pocket. I work in tech. Please." But none of it seemed to matter. Minutes passed. The officers made him sit on the curb, his hands still cuffed, sweat soaking through his shirt. They rummaged through his belongings, calling in his ID, scanning through his notebook as if it held secrets. Marvin's breathing was tight. His chest felt like a knot pulled taut. A crowd had gathered now. Neighbors, strangers, even a little boy holding his father's hand, watching with wide eyes. And then, from that crowd, a woman stepped forward. She wore a teal nurse's uniform, her hospital ID still clipped to her collar. "I know him," she said loudly. "He didn't break into anything. That man lives around here." The officers paused. The woman looked directly at them. "I've seen him before. He volunteers at the community center. And you didn't even ask him for an alibi?" The tension shifted slightly. The older officer looked at the younger one. Then, reluctantly, they uncuffed Marvin. No apology, no explanation, just a cold dismissal. "You're free to go." Marvin stood slowly, rubbing his wrists. He looked at the crowd, then back at the officers. "Is this what it's like now?" he asked quietly. "To be guilty for walking while black?" He picked up his bag and walked away. But the incident didn't end there. That night Marvin sat on his apartment couch, replaying the moment over and over. The fear, the anger, the powerlessness. He'd always believed in justice, in truth. But what happens when the very system meant to protect you turns on you without cause? He called his mother. "I was profiled today," he said quietly. "They made me sit on the ground like a criminal." Her voice shook. "You're okay now, baby?" "Yeah," he said. "But I don't think I can let this slide." The next morning, Marvin did something he never thought he'd do. He filed a formal complaint with the police department. Then he posted his experience on social media, not for sympathy, but for awareness. He ended his post with one line that echoed across the internet. "I was almost another hashtag today." Within hours, his story caught fire. By the end of the week, it was on the local news, then national. Outlets called it another example of racial profiling in America. A black man detained for no reason other than the color of his skin. The police department issued a short statement saying the officers acted within protocol based on a matching description. But for many, it wasn't enough. Protests formed outside the department. Activists called for accountability. Marvin found himself pushed into the spotlight, not as a victim, but as a voice. One afternoon, a reporter asked him, "What do you want people to take away from what happened?" Marvin paused. "I want people to understand that this wasn't about a mistake. It was about a mindset. You looked at me and saw a suspect, not a citizen, not a man. That has to change." He never planned to become an activist, but something in him had shifted. He started speaking at schools, at panels, at forums on police reform. Each time he told his story, it wasn't just about what happened. It was about what could have happened, what still could happen. And while Marvin was learning to find his voice, another story began to unfold, one that no one saw coming. One of the officers involved in the stop, Officer Travis Malone, the younger cop with the mirrored glasses, had been following the news coverage in silence. At first, he was defensive. He'd been doing his job, hadn't he? Following a lead, keeping the community safe. But the more he watched Marvin speak, the more something in his chest began to ache. Not guilt, not yet, but discomfort. A question he couldn't shake. What if I was wrong? He'd seen the body cam footage, heard Marvin's calm voice, saw the pain in his eyes as he was cuffed for no reason. And then one night, sitting in his small apartment, he turned off the TV and just sat there, staring at nothing. A man he didn't know, whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time, had become a national symbol of injustice. And he had helped put him there. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Officer Travis Malone didn't sleep that night, or the night after. The face of Marvin Carter stayed with him, clear as day, haunting as a shadow. That look of shock and quiet hurt when the cuffs clicked. The way he spoke with restraint, even as his dignity was stripped on the side of a hot Dallas street. Travis had spent 7 years on the force, grew up believing in law and order. His father had worn the badge, his uncle too. Protect and serve, they'd always said. But no one ever talked about what to do when the system you're serving might be doing the damage. After a week of sleepless nights, Travis made a decision that surprised even himself. He went to his supervisor and asked for a meeting with Marvin Carter. The department was hesitant. Lawyers squirmed. Public relations folks tried to steer him away. You don't owe him anything, they said. This'll blow over. But Travis didn't care. Because deep down, he knew he did owe him. Not just an apology, but an acknowledgement. Something real. Marvin agreed to the meeting. Barely. They met at a neutral space, a small room in a local community center. No cameras, no press. Just the two of them, and a mediator sitting quietly at a distance. When Marvin walked in, he kept his expression steady. But his guard was up. Understandably. Travis stood. Mr. Carter, thank you for meeting me. Marvin nodded but said nothing. There was a long silence. Then Travis finally spoke. I've been thinking about that day nonstop. About how I approached you. How quick I was to assume. To act. And I realized, I didn't see you for who you were. I saw a silhouette. A threat. Not a man. Marvin narrowed his eyes. And what changed? Travis looked down. You. Watching you speak after. Hearing how you handled it with grace even when you had every right to be furious. It made me question everything. Marvin leaned forward, his voice quiet but firm. Do you know what it's like to be terrified for your life for doing absolutely nothing? To wonder if this is the moment you don't walk away from? I didn't say anything because I was scared. One wrong move, one twitch, and I could have been a headline. Travis swallowed hard. I know. Or, I'm trying to know. Another pause. Then Travis did something unexpected. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. Handwritten. No badge, no official header, just raw words. It's a letter I wrote. Not for the department, not for PR, for you. And your mom, and every black man I've treated like a suspect before asking for their name. He slid it across the table. Marvin stared at it for a moment, but didn't touch it. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Travis added. I'm asking for understanding, and maybe a chance to do better. Marvin finally looked him in the eyes. You want to do better? Then stop being silent when it's easy. Speak up when it's hard. Train your rookies to see humanity, not just compliance. Because this, he gestured between them, this doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's taught. It's repeated. It's ignored. The mediator sat quietly, taking notes. But the real work was happening in that charged silence. And then, something shifted. Marvin sighed, leaned back and said, All right, you want to do better? Prove it. From that day forward, Travis did. He joined a pilot program focused on community police trust building. Not just some photo op initiative, but real, boots-on-the-ground work. He started sitting in on youth groups at the same community center. Listened more than he spoke. He even invited Marvin to co-lead workshops on de-escalation and racial bias. At first, people were skeptical. Some still were. But slowly, trust began to take root. One evening, After a heated session with a group of local teens, Marvin and Travis stood outside the center. The air was thick with summer humidity, but lighter than before. "You know," Marvin said, "you're not the same guy who cuffed me." Travis smiled faintly. "And you're not just the man I almost ruined with a snap judgment. You're a mirror. One I needed." Marvin nodded. "It's not about being perfect. It's about not pretending like the problem doesn't exist." Months passed. The story, which once shook the city, evolved. News outlets started covering the transformation, not just of Travis, but of the department. A few other officers stepped up too, willing to learn, to listen, to be uncomfortable. At a town hall one fall evening, Marvin stood in front of a packed crowd. "I never asked for this platform," he began. "I didn't want to become the guy who got profiled. But sometimes the things meant to break you become the things that wake you up." He looked out at the sea of faces, young, old, black, white, brown, and then over to where Travis sat in the front row. "This isn't about villainizing every cop or excusing every injustice. It's about owning what's broken and being brave enough to fix it." A standing ovation followed, and as Marvin stepped down, a little boy, maybe 8 or 9, walked up to him. "Mr. Carter," he said shyly, "I want to be like you when I grow up. Strong, brave." Marvin knelt to his level. "You already are," he said with a smile. "Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" "When you grow up, help someone see the world clearer than they did before. That's how we change things." That night, Marvin went home feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. He knew there was still work to be done. Knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. But he also knew that change had started. Not just in press releases or hashtags, but in hearts. In one honest conversation. One act of humility. One brave man willing to say, "I was wrong." And in another man who refused to stay silent. If there's one thing this story leaves behind, it's this: power means nothing without responsibility, and respect means everything when it's hardest to give. If this story made you pause, made you think, or made you feel something, subscribe, because we've got more stories to tell, and sometimes one voice is all it takes to change the direction of 1,000 others.